But it's more so an indication that the Republicans are extremely contradictory here. They claim to be pro-life. Once you're born, they don't give a single fuck about you. They're not in favor of stronger social safety nets. They're not in favor of free school lunches. They're not in favor of Medicare. They're not in favor of a public healthcare option. They're not in favor of any of this. They're just pro-life so long as you're a fucking fetus, and then the minute you pop out, you're on your own, pal. Have fun. All right? Wait, you want government housing? Well, I'm sorry. Is this communist Russia? But we also have to be realistic about why this was able to be overturned in the first place, and it's because it was built upon shaky legal grounds. And that is why even pro-choice justices have acknowledged that Roe v. Wade was not a very good ruling. That's why even Ruth Bader Ginsburg has acknowledged that this was not a good ruling. It was far too open. As you all know by now, the Supreme Court has officially overturned Roe v. Wade, the landmark decision from 1973, which essentially made abortion a constitutional right, and it made it so that abortion had to be legal federally, nationwide. That is what the 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision did, and it is now, since the other day, been overturned by far more conservative Supreme Court justices, which we have now. Now, the first thing I will say, and I'm only going to touch on this briefly, but you see a lot of people on Twitter who are either very doomer, very illiterate, or just in it for nothing but the Twitter points, who are saying things like, why, we shouldn't even bother voting. Oh, look what happened. Why isn't Biden changing this? Oh. First of all, the fact that we have conservative Supreme Court justices is actually because people voted for Donald Trump. Voting does play a role in this. Second of all, when people say, why doesn't Biden fix this? Again, our government has a certain process, and Joe Biden doesn't just have the make abortion legal again red button. He cannot assume authoritarian power. That is not how this works, okay? So there's that. That is important to remember, that this is not something that can just be easily changed by the president. It needs to go through a certain process, but voting absolutely can help. And that is why no matter how doom and gloom you might feel, no matter how upset you might feel, totally fine. You need to continue voting, and you need to continue voting for the lesser of the two evils, which is the Democrats in this case. Second of all, you understand my position on abortion, generally speaking. Morally, I view abortion as being a very moral gray area. I can kind of see it from both ways. I'm like the little fence-sitting centrist. However, it seems that we have plenty of data and evidence to suggest that the more that abortion is banned, the more you are going to see unsafe abortions taking place, and the more you will see pregnancy-related deaths. That does not just mean death when giving birth. It could also mean death a year after giving birth. There are all kinds of complications that can arise, and there have already been studies using algorithms which showed that if abortion, for example, was banned nationwide, we would see massive upticks of maternal death. Really quite scary. It's terrifying, and it's also kind of contradictory because it seems as though the pro-life Republicans are not actually that pro-life. You've all heard the quote, Republicans are only pro-life until you're born. It's honestly completely true. It's like the king in Shrek, where he's like, some of you might die, but that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make. My personal opinions on abortion and how I view it as being moral or immoral is not that relevant here, because at the end of the day, abortion is not something that you can change via legislation. People are going to get abortions, and banning it, or if you have states, I guess, that are banning it now that it's left up to the states, you're going to see a decrease of abortion, of course, because like if you ban something, it's going to do something to prevent it or cause a decrease. However, at what cost? You've heard me make this argument before. At what cost? At the cost of mothers' lives? At the cost of a far worse life for those children that now are going to be born? And that's not to say that the kids should be aborted or something, but it's more so an indication that the Republicans are extremely contradictory here. They claim to be pro-life. Once you're born, they don't give a single fuck about you. They're not in favor of stronger social safety nets. They're not in favor of free school lunches. They're not in favor of Medicare. They're not in favor of a public health care option. They're not in favor of any of this. They're just pro-life so long as you're a fucking fetus. And then the minute you pop out, you're on your own, pal. Have fun. All right? Wait, you want government housing? What? I'm sorry. Is this communist Russia? Excuse, you want Medicare? Honey, take some personal responsibility and just don't get sick, jackass. That's pretty much the Republican mindset at this point. So let's actually get into the Roe v. Wade thing here. Now, do I think this is a good idea? Do I think that it was good that it was overturned? No, I don't. I think that it's going to result in quite a lot of harm. However, and I recognize that I'm going to get backlash for this, I almost see what happened with Roe v. Wade as being inevitable. This was most likely going to happen. The truth of the matter is, the reason this was overturned is because Roe v. Wade, the original decision in the 1970s, was built on extremely shaky legal foundations. The reason that this Roe v. Wade decision was made originally was by invoking the 14th Amendment, claiming that women had a right to privacy, and so that means they had a right to abortion. There was nothing really laid out in the Constitution, and the justices at the time did not even bother to really cite the Constitution. They kind of used some loopholes to get around it and essentially make abortion available nationwide. And unfortunately, Roe v. Wade was built upon extremely shaky legal grounds, and that's why now it is able to be overturned. So let's go over this, and before you crucify me, don't forget that I'm actually citing an opinion from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A sweeping new abortion right built on a shaky legal foundation. So what went wrong with Roe? Why did the court's effort to resolve the abortion controversy in 1973 lead instead to decades of division? Legal scholars and political scientists point to major missteps at the start that left the decision vulnerable. In Roe, the justices announced a broad new constitutional right to abortion that is not explicitly found in the words or the history of the Constitution. So they omitted any reference to the Constitution when making this decision, it seems. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, said Justice Samuel A. Alito, Jr. He wrote in a draft published Monday by Politico. He added that Roe's reasoning was exceptionally weak. Blackmun based his ruling on the idea that the Constitution protects a broad right to privacy, which is implied by the 14th Amendment. The amendment says no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The court had cited this privacy right before, most notably in 1965, to strike down a Connecticut law that made it a crime for married couples to use contraceptives, which now certain justices are making threats in regards to these rulings as well. We're going to talk about that in a second, though. While the Constitution does not explicitly mention any right of privacy, he wrote, its protection for personal liberty and privacy is broad enough to encompass a woman's decision whether or not to terminate her pregnancy. Now, listen to this, okay? Take a step back from the worry about Republican states banning abortion and everything, and listen to what they wrote here. This does not sound very strong. Hunter is ticking right again. It's not right-wing to acknowledge that this was built upon shaky legal foundation. And you know what? You and all your little chuckle fucks on Twitter who are now crucifying me and treating me as if I'm some Nazi reactionary because I dare to actually speak the truth, even if the truth is not in my favor in certain instances, just shows that you're actually a partisan hack. Find your father and go fuck yourself. Conservatives regularly cite Roe as an example of liberals finding new constitutional rights in provisions or language never intended for such purposes. It's a very bad decision, wrote Yale law professor, a former clerk to Chief Justice Earl Warren, because it is not constitutional law and gives almost no sense of an obligation to try to be. Those critics included a young Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Uh-oh, buddy. Hey, Nico P., I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg is ticking right, dude. I think she's actually a reactionary neo-Nazi. Holy shit. In the years before she became a justice, she said the court made a mistake by going too far, too fast in its first ruling on the constitutionality of abortion. She also gave several speeches criticizing the court's handling of the abortion issue. Roe v. Wade became and remains a storm center, she said, because the court ventured too far in the change it ordered. Rather than resolve the issue, the court's broad ruling, quote, halted a political process that was moving to liberalize abortion already, she said, and instead launched, quote, the mobilization of the right to life movement that changed American politics. Roe's timetable was another problem. In November 1972, Blackmun sent his colleagues a near final draft of his opinion that concluded abortion should be legal through the first 3 months of pregnancy. This is arbitrary, but perhaps any other selected point, such as quickening or viability, is equally arbitrary, he said. 2 other justices sent back memos suggesting the legal cutoff should be at the point of viability, which comes between the 24th and 28th week of pregnancy. And you know what? I haven't done a whole lot of research on this yet, but I believe that there is still strong evidence to suggest that the fetus does have a level of sentience around this time, around the 24, 28 week mark. So even if abortion was made legal nationwide, it should still have a cutoff time around this time, around the 24th and 28th week of pregnancy. It's why partial birth abortion laws were such a political goldmine for Republicans. Roe created such a broad abortion right that it probably pushed some of the many Americans in the middle of the spectrum on this issue into the opposition. Roe is the catalyst for the Christian right to get engaged in politics. Oh no. Oh God. We have like cancer meets AIDS with the Christian right mixing up with the GOP. Holy shit. Ever since they have made an issue out of abortion and organized around it, very few people have read Roe, but abortion has become a very partisan issue. But we also have to be realistic about why this was able to be overturned in the first place, and it's because it was built upon shaky legal grounds. And that is why even pro-choice justices have acknowledged that Roe v. Wade was not a very good ruling. That's why even Ruth Bader Ginsburg has acknowledged that this was not a good ruling. It was far too open, and it unfortunately led to a lot of unintended consequences, like the Christian conservatives teaming up with the GOP and the right to life movement and all this other bullshit. Now we have the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who's a massive piece of shit, by the way, who's now saying that gay rights and contraception rulings should be reconsidered after Roe is overturned. I'm sorry. Are any of these chuckle fuck boomers aware of the fact that contraception access leads to less abortion? Do they realize how stupid this is to start attacking contraception next? Use contraception to lower abortion, but no, we're going to get rid of abortion and now we're going to get rid of contraception? You're giving people no choice but to either A, not have sex, which I'm sorry, not gonna fucking happen, pal, or just basically force women into being nothing but baby incubators, just a machine to pump out babies. That's it. So Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas on Friday said landmark high court rulings that established gay rights and contraception rights should be reconsidered now that the federal right to abortion has been revoked. This is most likely not going to happen, and that's because Roe v. Wade was built on shaky legal foundation. These decisions were not. No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, and it also encompasses privacy as well. So yeah, life and liberty and privacy, that falls right in line with gay marriage and with contraception use. The state cannot step in and say what you do in your own house with another consenting adult is not allowed. We're going to stop you from doing that. You literally cannot do that. So Thomas wrote that those rulings were demonstrably erroneous decisions. The cases he mentioned are Griswold v. Connecticut, the 1965 ruling in which the Supreme Court said married couples have a right to obtain contraception, which is true, and Lawrence v. Texas, which in 2003 established the right to engage in private sexual acts. Yeah, you can't outlaw sodomy, dude. Like, that's what this 2003 thing was. It was about getting rid of laws that prohibited sodomy. I'm sorry. Maybe you dumb fucks want to take us back to, I don't know, Sharia law. But as far as the rest of us, you, the government, cannot step in and outlaw what people do in their private bedrooms and their private homes so long as it is consensual between two legal adults. And the 2015 rulings in Oberfell v. Hodges, which said there is a right to same-sex marriage. Thomas's recommendation to reconsider the trio of decisions does not have the force of legal precedent, nor does it compel his colleagues on the Supreme Court to take the action he suggested. At least there was some legal wiggle room for them to actually overturn the Roe v. Wade thing, But how can you not invoke the right to life, liberty, property, and privacy in regards to accessing contraception or getting married or engaging in sexual activity, again, so long as it's consensual? I don't know how you would be able to justify that. I don't know how that was an erroneous decision, because the 14th Amendment seems pretty clear in regards to privacy, life, liberty, which encompasses all of these things. Now, you've all heard this joke made before, but I'm going to show it again. It's funny because he's talking about all this old legislation. Well, what about Loving versus Virginia, Clarence? I'm pretty sure you have a white wife, don't you? Well, what about that one? This was in 1967. It was a landmark civil rights decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in which the court ruled that laws banning interracial marriage violate the equal protection and due process clauses of the 14th Amendment. If you're going to start trampling all over the Constitution, then what's next? Get rid of this one, pal. Divorce your wife. That we should maybe be looking at to overturn. Okay, well, while you're at it, overturn Loving v. Virginia, pal. Let's see what happens then. Why do you not mention this one? For the time being, it doesn't seem like this is going to happen, but you know what? It makes me quite nervous because it seems as though this is the end goal of these disgusting Republicans. They don't care about people, it seems. It genuinely seems like Republicans just want to make life miserable for everybody. It's like that good old-fashioned saying, you know? Republicans are miserable because of their beliefs. Everyone else is miserable because of Republicans. It unironically is making that little meme come true. Like, I don't know how you fuckwits are able to look at other Supreme Court rulings which properly invoked the 14th Amendment and say, maybe we should do away with that one too. Let's leave the right to states. Let's give states the decision whether or not they can ban you from accessing contraception. Yeah, that's a good idea. That way in Texas, we can see where all the Republican hillbillies go. We'll see them say, hey, no more condoms for you. It's just abstinence only. Skippity hee-haw, motherfucker. Yee-haw. Like, what the fuck, dude? Men, stop fighting for your own irresponsibility. Men, stop fighting for your own irresponsibility. So this is another thing that I have a little bit of an issue with this overruling here, is that we're once again back to the similar conversation we have in regards to systemic racism. Now, these chucklefuck Republicans can essentially just impugn the character of certain individuals rather than recognizing that like broader legislation can play a role. So now instead of saying, hey, you should, abortion should be like a last option for some people during this time. None of that. That's all out the window. Now it's just be more responsible. Men, just don't have sex. Losers. Now, the truth of the matter is, you should be responsible. You absolutely should. But you know what? Sometimes people are responsible and then mistakes are still made. Sometimes you can be responsible, but certain legislation can also play a role. Republicans consistently do this, and I think that far too often lefties and liberals sort of buy into it without realizing, but they set it up as if it's a dichotomy. They tell you that the choice with systemic racism is either black people work harder or everything's systemic racism. No, it's both. There is systemic racism, yes, but you should also work hard. You should work as hard as you can to do the best you can in your life, regardless of systems in place that might disadvantage you. The same thing goes with sexual activity. Be responsible. Don't run around fucking raw dogging every hoe you run into, men. Okay? Don't do that shit. And women, be responsible. Don't, honestly, try your best not to go out partying, get drunk, and then just, go home for a gangbang. Yes, of course, responsibility is important here, but being responsible does not overrule or outweigh the legislation that should also be put in place. And this is what people just never understand, and it's really, really disappointing to me. The far right is, of course, celebrating this as well. You realize that minority communities have disproportionate lower access to contraception, right? You realize that that's one of the reasons why we see higher rates of abortion amongst minority communities. So if you get rid of abortion and then try to get rid of contraception, Well, sorry, reactionary pieces of shit. Have fun becoming the minority even sooner. Man, here I was really looking forward to, 2050 when white people became the minority here in the country. But thanks, Republicans. Thanks, far right. Looks like you guys just sped it up by a bit. Maybe in the next 20 years now, you guys can be the minority. See how you like that one. See how you like them apples. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the bell so you get notified when I drop a new video.